Hi, my name is Sharon Acoff-Sledge, and I want to talk about what is a narrative research study. Narrative research, according to Cresswell and Guterman, it's a qualitative strategy in which the researcher studies the lives of individuals and asks one or more participants to provide stories of their life. And it focuses on the meaning that individuals give to their experiences, often presented chronologically. You would use a narrative research study if someone feels a need to tell their story. Okay, so you use narrative research when you seek to explore lived experiences. What did these people go through? And you can interview them and get the information in depth. If you want to understand how people make sense of their experiences, and a detailed personal story can reveal deep insights into a phenomenon. Although this was not a study, well, the Henrietta Lacks, that was a study, but when an investigative reporter, a young investigative reporter, wanted to investigate what happened to Henrietta Lacks and how it affected her family. She started out with interviewing Henrietta Lacks' children after Henrietta's death. So she interviewed people who were connected, her children, her grandchildren. And so as I read about narrative research, I thought about that. We would not understand the depth and the impact on her family, on Henrietta Lack's family, if we did not have that investigative reporter do that. So that kind of reminded me of what the book was saying that a narrative research study is about. You use it when someone needs to tell their story. So what methodology do you use in a narrative research study? You can collect stories through interviews, journals, letters, emails, essays, all that type of thing. And then restory, and that's when you reorganize the story into a chronological or thematic narrative. And I'm referring back to the Henrietta Lacks book that I read. The reporter had to assimilate all the information she gathered into a particular chronological order so that we could understand what was going on. And again, that's what reminds me of a narrative research study. Although a research study is more detailed than what that reporter did. Another thing that you would do with a narrative research study is contextualize the story within personal, social, and historical context. So, for example, let's say you want to study the effect of microaggressions on African American math teachers. So you would not interview or a Caucasian teacher or a teacher of other races because you would not encapsulate or contextualize that story within the context of the African American experience in America. So that is one thing that comes to mind. What coding do we use in a narrative research study? Thematic coding, structural coding, dialogic or performance coding, where you examine the interaction between the storyteller and the audience. The other two we've talked about earlier. Now, what are the advantages of using a narrative research study? Narrative research studies captures detailed personal experiences. Like, for example, an autobiography. That's somewhat of a narrative research study where that person is telling their story and someone is capturing that story. It gives the details, what the person experienced, what the person felt. So it gives more detail. It highlights the participant's voice and the participant's perspective. As again, the earlier thing I mentioned about microaggressions, you would have to be in a person of that ethnic persuasion's shoes to understand the perspective of what they have to deal with. And then narrative studies connects individuals' experiences to broader cultural or societal context. Now, what are the disadvantages of using narrative research study? It's time consuming. It's time consuming. You have to sit and listen to stories and people collecting, people recollecting, and you're pretty much at the mercy of the people that you're interviewing because you want to make sure that you don't miss anything. And I can relate to this because I am working with a genealogist to capture the history of my family, which is pretty much unique in that we have a common, everybody with the last name Acoff has a common ancestor, and his coming to Alabama is very unique. So in talking to the older relatives, you have to be patient, you have to record, you have to just take all of it and separate what you really need. So it can be time consuming. When you interpret what the information that you've gathered, there's a lot of subjectivity in there. And then we may not be able to generalize that data to larger populations. So those are some of the disadvantages. So what can we use this for? What is narrative research good for? It's suitable for individuals with unique or impactful life experiences. For example, during Desert Shield and Desert Storm, prior to that, all of the engineers I worked with, we worked with simulations of different things that were going on. But when we had to recreate a certain scenario where real people whose names we knew actually died in an incident, and we had to recreate and figure out what happened, it affected a lot of us greatly. And I would and I often tell people that's a pivotal point when I decided that maybe my career field wasn't for me. And it's also for groups with shared cultural or historical experiences, situations involving change, trauma, identity, or transformation. So you could use narrative research for all of these things. And these are different research studies that I could write. A study on a teacher's experience navigating remote learning. I would love to capture that information. The life story of a first generation college student. People managing chronic illnesses, stories of veterans reintegrating into civilian life. Those are all studies that would lend itself to narrative research study. Thank you for listening. That was good.